So now we know what the original BioWare team was up to. EA had them making a Destiny competitor because Activision can't have one genre without EA actually having that shit as well. It's like the YouTube owner getting jealous of someone having a better dildo to go fuck themselves with. Now, if you haven't seen it by now, there's a brief video footage of Anthem, BioWare's game that's been under wrap for a couple years. It was released earlier this week as part of the E3 conferences, initially announced during EA's conference, and then it has some gameplay footage. And I say gameplay footage very loosely, but they had gameplay that was shown at Microsoft's Xbox One X's show. No matter how many times I try to say that shit, it sounds more stupid each fucking time, man. Oh, I'm not even gonna get into that shit because Xbox One X sounded a whole lot better than Scorpio in this motherfucker. But anyways, on to Anthem. From the small sampling video, which you have to take with a grain of salt these days, it appears this is going to be another shared world, co-op, loot shooting, science fiction type game with space magic. Basically, Destiny. And from that video, you can see that there's going to be a whole bunch of different types of characters in this game as part of the whole traditional RPG roles. There was like a tanky type character who's most likely going to be a traditional bullet sponge type player. I'm sure there's going to be a damage dealer who specializes in offense, probably some stealth, some healing, combination of characters or whatever. So it has all the makings of your traditional RPG elements. It has your sci-fi elements, of course, on a completely different world, planet, whatever the fuck it is, alien enemies that you're going to be fighting, and some big scale animals that you might potentially fight based on what we saw from the video. However, like any video presentation these days, you have to assume that at least half of that shit we saw in the reveal video will not be in the game, since that was merely a hype video. Essentially, marketing. Companies just like to show off what their game could potentially do, but as we know, and as we have seen, games usually fall short of what their demos are able to do. I mean, just look at some of the prior works that are similar to this game. Destiny, of course, will be the game that this is compared to infinitely, and I'll talk more about that in a second, but Destiny's reveal trailer had shit we didn't get in the game. It had a section of the wall that we didn't get, it had people on top of the wall fighting a Devil Walker tank or whatever the fuck it is, background environment destruction that never occurred. Basically, it was some cool looking shit that never made it into the game. The Division is another game in which Anthem will be classified within the same genre. The Division had an amazing reveal trailer. They had you fighting in Brooklyn against some other team of agents, whatever the fuck it was, only to find out that Brooklyn was not part of the original Dark Zone in the game. It was only part of the prologue. They had a drone that basically fucked up every enemy. Also, that wasn't in the game. So by now, people know trailers do not give you an accurate portrayal of what the game is going to look like. Shit, the Division graphics alone were significantly downgraded compared to the footage that we initially saw. So while Anthem looked gorgeous on the Xbox One X, oh god, that stupid fucking name console. Anyway, that doesn't mean that's what it's going to look like when the game actually releases. You know, I think by now people have come to accept and realize this marketing material is shit that is not entirely going to be in the game. Pieces of it might, but certainly not to the extent of the videos that we've shown. I mean, BioWare alone showed us footage of Andromeda, and they ultimately fuckered up that one after the fact. So this is nothing new when it comes to games showing off impressive marketing footage, only to come back on that shit. Oh, and for those of you wondering why Andromeda was so shitty, there was an article on Kotaku recently that gave all the details of the problems of the game. None of it is surprising, but essentially the studio that worked on the original trilogy is the one that is doing Anthem. They're a stepchild of a studio in Montreal. They basically handled Andromeda. You know, it's like asking Denzel Washington to star in your movie as a dashing actor for a gritty role, and then you end up getting like fucking David Chappelle all fucked up on antidepressant drugs doing the part. That's a bad mix, man. The article said that the studio tried to create a No Man's Sky type game with procedural generated planets and whatnot, and they had to do that with an understaffed and inexperienced team that had not created a full game in the first place. The only thing they had done up to this point was support content. They lose their creative director early in the process, their pre-production plans all go to shit, their No Man's Sky type world doesn't work out, and then they have a deadline to get all this completed because EA got tired of waiting for this fucking game. So you can see, it was a fucked project from the start because they put an inexperienced studio on a follow-up project hoping they wouldn't fuck up. Well, basically, they fucked up. So while BioWare Montreal deserves their portion of the blame for making a shitty product, honestly, they were set up to fail. It's really shitty when you know you're being set up to fail, and no matter how hard you try to avoid that outcome, you fail anyways. Anyway, listen, I'm getting sidetracked again. Let's get back to Anthem. BioWare Edmonton is the studio working on this game, and it seems that this sucker has been in development for actually quite a long time, at least the concept. And the world of the game has been in development, but the gameplay seems to have stemmed from popularity of Destiny. If the rumors are true, This game was initially expected to be on par with like Skyrim, Fallout in terms of like its RPG-ish elements, and then to add a co-op feel to the game, but with the boatload of money that Destiny pulled in, the gameplay and the mechanics were all altered towards this shared world type of environment, which certainly seems to suit these open world type games these days. When you look at the pedigree of BioWare, you know this is a studio that can create worlds, that can bring branching stories into games, evolving characters that you enjoy playing with. That's been their strength with all their games. Mass Effect and Dragon Age have showed off their RPG pedigree and the ability to create a fantasy world. You have to believe this is their bread and butter with Anthem. The question is, can you blend that into the current shared world co-op story multiplayer environment that we've already seen? And will BioWare actually add a player versus player component to the game, seeing that they've avoided that with Mass Effect? If you're going to compete against some of the shared world games, that is a piece that keeps the popularity going while there is a lack of DLC content. Now let's look at a few comparisons first. I'll save Destiny for last, since that will be the most obvious. Borderlands is certainly a game that fans like to classify in that category, and there's certainly some similarities. Co-op with friends, different characters, random generated loot. But without the major social spaces where you can see and meet other people and a PvP model, it's a bit lacking when it comes to the shared world genre. Plus, it really wasn't until Borderlands 2 that the game found its footing. It had excellent comedy and characters in the first game, but what was the big knock on the game? There was no story. In Borderlands 2, Gearbox learned from that and they created a much more cohesive game, but even with the improvements in making an excellent game, it still lacks the PvP and social space area. So while many people would consider Borderlands to be the model that these shared shooters are following, personally, I think it's really a smaller scaled version of what's already been created. Add in their time and you create a second game that drastically improved on the first, and you have a game that's more in line with co-op games compared to shared world games. The Division, though, is an excellent competitor because it has the elements of that shared world. You have the social spaces and the safe houses with other players, plus you have the Dark Zone, which is where you combine your PvP and AI elements, plus social spacing. It had a compelling story throughout the game, and even adding the backstory with the little tidbits of the virus after the fact with all those collectibles around the map and shit like that. However, the game really didn't have a differential of characters, such as like a tank or a mage, but it did have built-in powers for offense, defense, and healing. It had different types of weapons, different loadouts, and I guess that's going to be similar to what they call the javelins or the exosuits in the upcoming Anthem game. That'll differentiate your abilities. The problems the game had, though, are well documented, and there's no need to compare that shit right now, because obviously Anthem just showed us all the 4 fucking minutes, but one of the most memorable parts of the Division was the reveal trailer at E3 2013, fucking 4 years ago. Yes, 4 years ago. The Division made its debut at E3, and it was a gorgeous looking game. Y'all remember that shit? Between the graphics, the smooth gameplay at the time, the promise of all New York City being under siege for some reason, which we later learned was a virus, it had the makings of a top-notch game. But Ubisoft is known for making trailers that look amazing, but fall short of greatness. Assassin's Creed, Watch Dogs, just to name a few of them. A few more years of development, a few trickles of info, including some gameplay, and all of a sudden, the game went from being massively impressive to looking somewhat average. I mean, the graphics were significantly downgraded, the action was dialed down, the enemies seemed generic for the most part. They launched the beta, which really took a beating for the graphics and the gameplay, but the beta was fun. It had issues, but it certainly was fun. The game rolled out, sold millions. It was excellent, ranking up to level 30, but it had its issues. Mainly the enemies were bullet sponges, and the gameplay was utterly fucking painfully repetitive. Once you hit max rank, there was the Dark Zone, and ultimately that was really it. Ubisoft had an excellent campaign idea, but it was the ongoing content where they had their problems. The shared world part was decent, the loot was a little fucked up and manageable, but the endgame content was the problem. Combine that with the downgrades we got, and now you can see why the Division struggled after its first month. Remember, this game was seriously promising in 2013, yet 3 years later, it fell flat on its fucking face just after 1 month of release. So, if Anthem wants to avoid that same fate, they need to avoid the same issues the Division had and have a gameplay for what happens after you finish the story and the campaign. There needs to be reasons why people return to the shared world other than just collecting shit. But the game that we all know that is going to be compared to for now and forever is Destiny. Look, I don't give a fuck what people think about the game at this point, whether it's a good game or a bad game, a success, a flop. The reality is Destiny is going to be Anthem's main competitor. It's the game that Anthem's success is going to be measured against because they have too many things in common not to be compared. It's Activision versus EA. It's the makers of Halo against the makers of Mass Effect, two of the best games Microsoft ever published. Remember that, the two studios that Microsoft helped build into their 360 publishing of games, Halo and Mass Effect. It's Bungie's first-person shooter mechanics that are the best in the business with their issues with storytelling and complete story in this motherfucker versus BioWare's third-person mechanics that always feel a bit off, but they know how to tell a compelling story. Science fiction versus science fiction. Promise of one game versus now the promise of Anthem. I don't need to repeat for the 100th time the history of Destiny, but you know the issues they have, and that has to be on the minds of BioWare and EA at this point. You know the promise of Destiny, the launch problems, the studio politics, the game that needed to be reworked, that has to be in the back of BioWare's minds. After all that, the same shit that plagued Destiny is the same shit that just hurt BioWare's Montreal studio with Andromeda. What's going to be the most intriguing battle between Destiny and Anthem, though, is player versus player. You know, as much as I hate the Crucible and dealing with the fucking issues that shit causes, but the biggest thing that kept Destiny going for all these years was the Crucible, as fucking annoying as it was. After the DLCs got stale, raids were completed, challenges were met, loot was collected, the only thing left to play was the Crucible, mainly Trials of Osiris. As fucked up as the Crucible is, as unplayable as Bungie has left that shit, it provides content to play. Strikes don't change, raids don't change, other than they rotate and whatnot. The PvE shit is not altered in any significant way, but the Crucible always changes depending on what players are in the room. BioWare does not have the PvP pedigree that Bungie has. They can tell a story, no doubt about that. They can develop the fuck out of a character and RPG elements better than Bungie can ever do, but they don't have shit on Bungie's competitive edge. From Halo to Destiny, Bungie knows how to make games that feel amazing. The mechanics are undeniably top-notch. Can BioWare combat that? Can Anthem release something that keeps players' attention as long as Destiny did and won't fizzle away after The Division did after 1 month and countless patches? Can they avoid the issues that Andromeda went through? Will they create another branching story path in which the ending of the game is basically take the red pill, blue pill, the green pill? Oh, fucking Mass Effect 3 ending, man. Save me, Marauder Shields, man. Save me, man. For me personally, BioWare has an uphill battle. I'm not going to praise or knock their reveal too much because after all, it is only a reveal and it was 4 fucking minutes. I don't expect everything in that reveal to be in the game, but at the same time, nothing about the game was actually told to us. It certainly looked amazing, but then again, so did The Division. They're certainly showing off intriguing gameplay in a cool world, but then again, so did Destiny. It's a game I'm certainly going to keep my eye on, and I'm going to almost guarantee I'm probably going to buy the motherfucker. But I think people who are automatically saying this looks better than Destiny, that it's going to replace Destiny, it'll beat Destiny, are getting way too ahead of themselves. You know, it has to prove it has the staying power of Destiny, which is not something many games have the ability to do. It has to prove the content is worth playing over and over and over again, unlike The Division. It has to shake the disappointment of Andromeda and the Mass Effect 3 ending and create a top-notch story with all the gameplay elements that players want. That's a fucking tall task, man. And you have to do that after Bungie has a chance to improve on their game with another sequel. So, those who are ready to anoint this as the next great game, I highly suggest taking a cautionary approach. Hope for the best, but expect a little bit less. Otherwise, if you shoot this game's expectations far beyond what they can deliver, that's going to be your own fault if this shit disappoints you. I want to like Anthem. I'm hoping it's going to be a great game, but I'm going to temper my expectations until I see a little bit more about this game. Anyways, out of all the other games that I saw at E3, this was the only other one that I really think deserved this video, because after all, the rest of the shit was just crap. Who gives a fuck about Call of Duty? I don't give a shit about that game, man. So anyway, as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit, and I'll see you guys in the next video.